A very good morning. You're watching Trade Setup with me, Tamanna Inamdar. All the news flow over the weekend has been about the attack by Hamas on Israel, an unprecedented attack when on Saturday morning, Hamas rained down 3,000 missiles on Israel. A full-blown conflict, a war is raging on in this moment. The question is, what is going to be the impact? We've already seen an initial impact on crude prices. Crude surged about 4 to 5% this morning, cooled off to a little sub 4% right now. But crude is going to be the big factor. Apart from this, we're going to be taking a look at what is going to be the impact for Indian equities. But let me go through the key factors that we're talking about today. So Brent crude, of course, surged nearly 5% post Hamas's attack on Israel. But before that, you had pretty good news. Before Saturday morning, it seemed pretty positive looking at how U.S. markets had shut on Friday. U.S. markets closed sharply higher on Friday on the back of robust U.S. jobs data and better than expected jobs data, though that does point to continued inflation concern. Those jobs numbers came in almost double of what was expected. Strong U.S. bond yields continue to point to interest rate hikes. The 10-year bond, the dollar index continue to be a worry. But what we're also going to talk about in the trade setup today is the big week ahead. Here back in India, the domestic news flow is going to be all about the corporate results. The Q2 numbers will begin. TCS will kick it off later this week. So let's get into it. I'm going to start first with what's happening with crude and what impact that can have. Now, from the Indian equity perspective, we need to look at it in two ways. Of course, crude jumping and sentiment souring is bad for any market. Indian equity markets are not going to be an exception to that. But specifically, trade relations between India and Israel have been growing exponentially over the last many years. And definitely there will be some sectors and some companies which will be impacted. Dr. Reddy's, for example, your generic drug makers, Kalyan Jewelers, because Israel is a big exporter of diamonds. We import from them as well. So there will be sector-specific impact that we need to look out for. The big picture, though, coming out from this entire conflict is a question of how long it will last. Will this be just limited right now to Israel and attacks on the Gaza Strip, counters on the Gaza Strip, or will Saudi Arabia get involved? Will Iran get involved? Will the United States will get involved? That's what we'll have to wait and see. So this is definitely a wait and watch situation. On the U.S. market side, U.S. markets on Friday, I was talking about it. It was a much better than expected close. The Dow Jones closed up about 0.87%. The S&P 500 was also up in the green, as was the NASDAQ. So this was a short covering sort of relief rally that we saw in the U.S. markets on Friday. And we'll have to see what that points out to. Like I mentioned, jobs data was a big trigger, a big factor. But overall, hardening bond yields, the dollar index is a continuing worry that, of course, developed markets will look at. And we saw that in the sustained FII selling. So let me turn my attention now to how Indian markets closed on Friday. FIIs sold 8,400 crores last week. DIIs bought about 4,400 crores last week. But the Nifty and the Sensex did also have a good close on Friday. After a bad midweek, they did have two continuous trading sessions up in the green. So the Nifty closed about 0.5% up and the Sensex 0.5% up on Friday as well. Domestically, of course, it's all about the Q2 numbers. That's the next big trigger that the market is looking out for. And it's going to kick off with the IT pack. So October 11th, we'll see TCS numbers. October 12th, Infosys and HCL Tech. The broad consensus seems to be that this is going to be a subdued quarter expected for the IT space. And the weakness that we saw in quarter one is likely to persist. What else can we watch out for? Economic data, which is going to be out this week on October 12th. You will have CPI numbers expected to cool off from the 6.8% we saw in September. But will it be within the 4 to 6% range that the RBI likes is what we'll have to wait and see. You'll see industrial output data also out. October 13, you get WPI, balance of trade. US data check on October 11th, the minutes will be out of the Federal Reserve's meeting, and that will be something that the street will be definitely watching, reading between the lines on what the indications are, and US inflation data will also be out on October 12th. Let me quickly go through interesting stocks that you can watch out for today before I get Agam in and talk a bit about the F&O space. So stocks to watch. MCX kabhi haan, kabhi na continues, but this time round, it's good news for MCX because they finally got SEBI's nod to launch their proposed commodity derivatives platform, which was put on hold last month. So the stock had jumped up on news that they could trade on this platform. Then they plummeted because SEBI, put that put a break on the whole operation, and now that initial order has been put in abeyance. Jindal Steel and Power, the company is planning to make its Angul unit India's largest single-location steel manufacturing facility. This is a news report this morning. It could have some impact. Swan Energy, the NCLT has asked the company and the successful resolution applicant for Reliance Naval and Engineering to make an upfront payment of 250 crore rupees. It's also in the newspapers. Of course, TCS. I talked about it. TCS in the news because of yes, the numbers, and also they're going to consider a buyback of shares on the October 11th board meeting, and that's always bringing in some excitement. Titan, the company, reported a 20% year-on-year increase in its standalone revenue. Basically, your business updates have been coming in all of last week, and some of them are looking good. Titan is one of them. Adani Energy Solutions, the company acquired a 100% stake in Sango Transmission Services. That news came in over the weekend. That was via cash at a face value of 10 rupees a piece. TVS Motors, the company on Friday started production in the Tamil Nadu manufacturing plant for CEO2. It's their first electric vehicle that is jointly designed and developed with BMW. And Biocon inked a pact with Canada's Juno Pharmaceuticals as well. So you're going to have some result-based action. You're going to have stock-specific action. And of course, the Israel impact, if at all. So what kind of stocks will we see impacted by the Israel conflict? Tied to generic drugs, chips, software services, diamonds in focus. So we talked about Dr. Reddy's, Lupin, Torrent. That may see some impact. Sun Pharma owns 72% stake in Israel's Taro Pharmaceuticals. So we'll have to see what impact comes in through there. But broadly speaking, that's a story that we can't really tell which direction it will go in. The hope is that it's a warlike situation which is now limited to just this area. And between this area, this geographical location between Israel and Palestine, crude production is not massive. That's not going to really move the needle. The question is if more players get involved and if this spreads. Now, having said that, let's turn our attention to the F&O piece of the story. Agam, good morning.
Good morning.
How's it looking this week?
Right, Tamanna. So, Friday's data points may be slightly less relevant now at the moment, considering West Asian conflicts impact on crude as well as dollar. That said, we did see both the benchmarks come off monthly lows, and we also saw a further unwinding of shorts made earlier. So we are looking at a decline in open interest as far as the Nifty futures go, as well as the Bank Nifty futures. What are the levels we're watching out for? Considering we saw strength in the previous two sessions as far as Nifty goes, and the Nifty coming off from the 1 month high, from 1 month lows, we've started to see some traction around the 20,000 mark. Now, before that, it was around 19,800, 19,700, but now we're starting to see some amount of writing and some amount of activity picking up in the 20,000 mark as well. On the lower end, of course, it's also shifted slightly higher to around 19,600 from 19,500 earlier. That said, we're possibly going to see a little bit of a reversal. It will all come down to how the first 1 hour of trade plays out. And I reckon that a lot of traders will take larger positions thereon once we know how markets settle in the first 1 hour of trade. The same for the Bank Nifty as well. Not too much to speak for. We're once again watching out for a very, very narrow range, at least in today's day of trade. But we may see a little more traction at around 44,500, and that continues to be something of a resistance of sorts, at least in the near term. but would wait out for the first hour of trade before we perhaps get a better direction as to where markets want to go.
This has been happening so often in the last few months. I think this is just a turbulent time. You went Friday on a certain kind of a situation, and then something happens over the weekend which blows that whole story out of the water. And this is definitely it. The Israel-Hamas war right now is going to be the big story. Just an aside there, we saw, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange slumping about 8% on the back of this, and that's probably likely to happen. Dow Jones futures were down 200 points when I checked last, but we'll have to keep a track on that. I'm going to wrap it up here for Trade Setup. Thank you all for joining us. Just a quick reminder, we are on top of the story all day on BQ Prime today, so do tune in for all of our coverage. I will be speaking with Vandana Hari later this morning as well to get her perspective on the crude part of the puzzle. Thank you for joining us.